Welcome into another episode of the Young Entrepreneurs Network podcast. Today's guest is someone that is a pioneer of the gaming world, someone that is a massive, almost like an inspiration. It's a full circle moment for me, mate. This is something that, like, growing up, 13, 14 years old, this was the guy that was leading the charge when it came to the European side of things when it comes to gaming. So it's going to be something different. This guy was an entrepreneur before I even knew what an entrepreneur really was back then, sourcing sponsorships, taking salaries in the game world. I think you might have been maybe one of the first to actually take a salary when I reflect back on it. But yeah, MarkyB, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit, mate?
Yeah, mate. I'm an ex-Call of Duty pro now, a Call of Duty coach. I also do a bit of podcasting here and there. I kind of do a bit of everything really nowadays, but primarily my main job is a Call of Duty coach. Then everything else on top of that's just kind of a bit extra, you know.
Amazing, mate. Amazing. Well, take us back to the kind of stuff I guess I'm touching on, mate, back when I was 13, 14, which I'm 25 now, mate. So it's,
yeah,
I feel like I'm fucking getting on, mate. It's actually quite mental to reflect back on, mate. But you were one of the first, especially in the gaming days. I mean, I went to I-51, which I was 14 at the time, and what age were you at the first event? When was your first event you went to?
Yeah, I think honestly it was so long ago now. I'm 29 now, so I think my first event I was 14 or 15, I believe. I honestly can't remember at this point, but yeah, it was down in, where was it, Loughborough? I got a mega bus down there. Back in those days, but that was before I was obviously getting paid or even getting funded to events. So I think I was, at this point, I was just working. I was in school working like a part-time job at night in a Chinese restaurant. Probably, you know, shouldn't have been, but but at the same time, that's what kind of funded me to be able to go down to these events. So it was outside of school, and obviously that like little part-time job, I was pretty much just grinding COD the entire time.
Yeah. Feel you on that, mate. My attendance was fucking abysmal at school. So
yeah, mine wasn't great.
Yeah, fucking abysmal. Especially when the new COD comes out, mate. That's where you're fucked for it. Like, do you used to go to don't know if you can even see the place. I don't know if it's open still to get the COD early.
Oh my god, this is like Glaswegian Call of Duty history. I can't remember what it was called, mate.
Fuck. I'm sure it'll pop back up.
Just outside Central. Oh man,
you used to get like 3-4 days early, sometimes even
earlier. And it was like, compared to the English people you played with online, they couldn't get it early. And we had like this shop, and we would get the advantage early doors. I'd be grinding the game for 4 days before it even came out. I'm level 55, and everyone's just getting on the game.
It's so class. It's nuts, but I guess, like, obviously those early stages where you were funding it yourself, when did things start to change where you started to get funding? What did it kind of look like, those early stages?
Yeah, when I was about, I want to say 17, just turning 18, that's when I started to get a bit of recognition within like the European Call of Duty space, started to kind of move my way up the ranks, doing better in like online competitions and stuff like that. And then I think my second event, which was in London, that was the first one I actually got, you know, basically everything covered, like, you know, travel, accommodation, etc. But at this time you weren't getting paid any salary still. It was just basically getting a full trip to go down to London. This was like the Emirates Stadium, not on the pitch or anything like that, but in some random boardroom in there. That was my first time actually traveling down and getting that sort of full experience. But still, at that point, it was still new.
Yeah, 100%, mate. And then obviously it kind of started venturing into like actual things, like, I guess, like reflecting actually. See, like TCM days. Yeah. Were you like salaried back then? Yeah,
I think my first salary from TCM, which was my first salary in gaming, I wouldn't even know if you would really call it a salary. It was like 200 quid a month. It's still better than nothing when you're, you know, 18 years old. And a lot of the money that I was earning at that point was just through prize money. So like the salary was there, but it wasn't really the salary that was, you know, able to, you know, fund your lifestyle. It was more so just winning tournaments. And at that point, we were like one of the top 2 teams in Europe. So it was always, you know, us or Epsilon, the other team that we were competing against, kind of in those finals, and that's how we were able to, you know, win and win money.
Yeah, I guess like to compare to now, because also you're coaching very much in the CTL up until this year. Yeah. What are some of the salaries that were rolling nowadays?
So bear in mind, 200 quid a month in these days for a European team, probably American teams maybe like 500, so because it was bigger. But now you're talking, you know, some players are making upwards of 25-30 grand a month. So yeah, it's obviously changed quite drastically. Almost feel like I was born in the wrong generation, because if I was a player now, obviously it would be a completely different kettle of fish. You're seeing all these players buying expensive cars, going on luxurious holidays, but I wasn't obviously benefiting that. But at the same time, I did obviously get the benefit of the CDL when it came to the coaching side, because back when I first started competing, there wasn't even coaches really. There was, but they weren't really, deeply in the strategy side of things. It was more like just hype men or people that kind of did things on the side to help players.
Like Mr. X.
Aye, screaming at other teams and those sort of things. So it wasn't really as serious a role. But then when I transitioned to coaching in like 2018, that's where teams more started to kind of turn themselves into not just for Call of Duty players, but actual sports teams. And all the organisations started investing more money into the infrastructure behind it and stuff like that.
Which is fucking mad. Absolutely mad.
Yeah.
I guess like one of the things I'm curious about reflecting back then, was there work that you were doing from like a mindset development side of things, or were you just showing up and just playing?
At that point in time, I was so young, it was just like grinding COD, to be honest. It was definitely not, I didn't really, look to read any books to improve my mentality, and definitely looking back, I could have done with some extra help there, to be honest. But yeah, no, just grinding COD, mate, and going to competitions and sort of learning as we go on. And that's one of the things in the esports industry really in general, is that there's no like blueprint on how to do things, because we're the first people doing it. So you're kind of like just learning through trial and error and making mistakes and seeing how the scenes have been improving over the years really.
And what was the, like, see if you compare now to back then, like, I mean, I even know from being involved, I guess from like a team aspect, you're building a team, you've got a leader, you've got a captain of some sort, you've got a shot caller, you've got all these sort of different areas that now that I'm in business really reflects on, like, these were many infrastructures that were being built to succeed, to make more money. Which is very eye-opening. What's the comparison like? Obviously back then there was basically none, whereas to now there's like the infrastructure behind a lot of these teams is fucking bizarre. Especially when you look at like Optic and stuff like that, these huge squads. Like, what was it like being in the transition period of seeing that actually evolve from fucking nothing to like literally like nowadays where there's employees in place just to fucking do the crazy shit for people? Yeah,
no, I mean, it's definitely sick that I've been involved from the get-go, just seeing, even just started like teams getting a coach, and then organisations starting to invest in like the marketing side and getting like videographers who'd follow you around, and then it was just like year after year, it just seemed like more and more people were getting involved in the more core team aspect side of things, to now the point where I was living in Toronto, like you're going to an office and there's like 80 other staff there, you know what I mean? Back when I was like a player, it was, the 4 players, the coach, and then obviously you had like management side from the organisations, but like apart from that, they didn't really have much involvement within the team. You didn't speak to them on a daily basis, you didn't see them very often. So it's, you had sponsors, but they weren't exactly providing very much probably to the organisations. So yeah, it's drastically changed for the better, for sure. I definitely think there's maybe some areas that esports has went down that hasn't really necessarily needed to, and that's kind of why the CDL's a lot right now. A lot of companies are cutting back in terms of like the money they're spending on certain things. So I definitely think over the COVID period, everyone was just hiring any role. When I was living in LA last year, like we had like 10 people just making TikToks at the company, you know what I mean? So it's just like they had so many people for just multiple different roles, and I think now that we're kind of in a bit of a correction period within the eco space, and everyone's now tailoring back a little bit, still investing in these aspects, because like marketing and all these sort of things are important, but definitely I think that some companies are spending way too much money within the Call of Duty League. So
I guess it's like, from my aspect, from a numbers basis, like outside looking in, from the rumours that I'd heard, like the actual amount to have a spot in the Call of Duty League, which I try and make this as simple as possible for the viewers. Like if you've never been involved in like any gaming or esports space, the way that Call of Duty evolved into a league where there was 12 spots, and those 12 spots were, you had to pay to like own those spots. I heard like that it was literally in the tens of millions to get one of these spots. And from me outside looking in, I don't understand how on earth they're profiting from that.
I think, to be honest, I don't think the valuation of the spots was correct, to be honest, from Activision. Well, I think that it was from what they promised initially. They obviously came to all these different companies. Some of them are owned by the biggest sports teams in the world, etc. And they've obviously promised all these different things for the 25 million investment. Immediately, like a lot of these companies didn't expect to have an instant return. I think a lot of the promises were based on like, in-game sales from like skins and all these sort of things, which didn't end up being as fruitful as they would have hoped. So I think a fair valuation would probably be like south of 10 million, but like, you know, teams were paying like 25 million. Some teams paid more than that, depending on the location it was in, because obviously different locations and cities have different values tied to them. Like LA is worth more than Chicago, for example, you know, so it's just one of those ones where different teams paid different amounts. But yeah, I don't think 25 million or more than that, which I've heard some teams did pay, was worth. But I think Activision are correcting it and giving some money back to the organisations now. So things are kind of getting better in a sense. But there's been a lot of back and forth from like Activision and the CDL teams themselves. But yeah, I mean, hopefully things turn around next year, because we're kind of in this course correction period.
Yeah, I would hope so, mate, because it's something that, like, even if you look from like a normal business perspective, expectations have been set that you're paying for said thing and all these things, and the expectations haven't been met at all. And usually in the form of business, at least people with good morals, it would be corrected in some sort of way with money back. So I'm glad that something like that's fucking happening, mate, because imagine a lot of the companies would be suffering like drastically as a result of it. Which is fucking mad. I've been curious, mate, because I guess your journey has went from like player obviously into coach. Walk me through like the transition period of that, like when you finally decided to go from player to coach, and then like what you actually had to do to get into the kind of coaching like mindset to help
at the time it was 2018, and I just failed to qualify for the league. So at that point in time, it was before the CDL, so you actually had to qualify by winning. I lost in the qualification match for both seasons of the league that year and the final match. So like I was so close to it, but obviously didn't in both occasions. So at that stage, like if you're not in the league, even at that point when it wasn't the CDL, the amount of money you can make is drastically dropped. I was already living away from home at that point, paying rent, etc. So I couldn't really afford to sustain not earning any money for like a very long period of time. I did try and continue competing for like maybe 2 months after that failed qualification, but then it was like my team wasn't doing well. I was a player that always wanted to be at least at the very top of the European scene. At that point, I was in like maybe the 5th, 6th best European team. So it wasn't really going well for me. Although I did believe personally that I was a really good player on that game. The opportunities started because I was getting to be an older player at that stage to go to more of the younger players. So I was missing out on a lot of these spots on the top teams. At that stage, I had a good relationship with Splice, who were like the top dogs in Europe at that point. I was good friends with the players there. And I was like, do you know what? I'm going to make the transition into coaching, because we'd heard the Call of Duty League coming about. So I thought it would be a good time when that increased investment comes into like the infrastructure of the team to kind of jump the gun early and get involved in that. The team didn't do well initially, and I wasn't a great coach initially because I still had the player mentality, and I think that I almost assumed as being that leadership type figure in a Call of Duty team that like being a manager would be the same, but it is in a lot of aspects, but I still had a lot to learn, and for me it was definitely took some time. I wouldn't really say I was fully like embraced in the coaching role until maybe the year after that, where I had some time away from competing.
What were some of the challenges during that time that you reflect back on that you felt like you could have developed more?
You know, not seeing myself as like a player anymore, and like being like really friendly with the players. Obviously, you're not horrible to them by any means, don't get me wrong, but I almost was too friendly with the players, and it like stops you getting that respect that you need to be a management type role. And not only that, I just looked at some of the players in the team and I actually thought I was better than still. So like I'm sitting there thinking like I should be playing here, and as a coach, you should never be sitting there thinking about your players like, oh, I should be playing instead of them. And that's how I thought at different moments in time.
Yeah, which like I guess is like an authority thing, right? It's like if you're someone that is like just friendly all the time. If you think of it from a football structure, it's like the assistant manager is usually someone that's a bit more friendly with the players. But the managerial role, like it's something that can be far different. Which I guess from a leadership perspective, mate, it's such a big journey. I know for me, like from the COD side of things, I speak about it sometimes in the podcast. Like at times I would be a shot caller or some sort of leader within a team. And I definitely reflect on this kind of like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan like mentality that it was like, I didn't give a fuck how you felt. I didn't give a fuck what your excuses were. If you weren't on for practice or you gave a shit excuse, like I was going to town on you. And like my reflection that like when I came into business, I think if I didn't have that time period where I was a really shit leader and something that in hindsight probably didn't have much of an effect on my like day-to-day life because I wasn't making any money from it in regards to salaries and like that. But it's definitely something in the competitive scene where I realised that my view of what a leader was completely wrong. And I think it wasn't until like Jack, who like works with Young and Lazy now, had been one of my best mates for over a decade. He was the one that got me into COD. He went by a tag name of Smithy. Jack like showed me text messages from back in like 2012, 2013 of him and Defrag, who I know you know really well. And it was me, Defrag, and Smithy like on a team. And it was a message from Jack. Now, mind you, me and Jack were best mates at school, so it was like a bit different. He was mentioning Adam along the lines of, I don't think I can ever team with John again.
Aye.
He's so brutal to play with.
Yeah.
He's so on me about fucking everything. Like, it's such an intense environment. And I just, like, when he actually was reading it back to me, I was like, holy shit, like, I really was a fucking cunt.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I was the exact same as well. To be honest, like looking back, I was definitely like that guy that was maybe a bit OTT. I can remember just freaking out about just the stupidest little things. And I think there's definitely like multiple different styles of leadership, don't get me wrong, but you need to find like a kind of balance. You can't just be that guy who's just, if you just shout and scream the entire time, then people are just going to start, you know, just ignoring you pretty much. So yeah, that's,
which I guess is like more like a dictatorship, right? It's
yeah,
like
exactly.
More, there's a book that I'm listening to just now, actually, it's really interesting. It's called The Motive, which is like the motivation behind being a leader, and like what it really stems from. And I think for me, definitely growing up, a lot of it was ego related, wanting to be the guy that everyone looks to, want to be almost like a not a father-like figure, but someone that bears that responsibility that, you know, if the team doesn't perform, it's my fucking fault. If the team does perform, credit where credit's due. But the book helps you understand. It's just like a 2.5 hour audio book, nothing crazy, but within that book it talks about this CEO that was, his motive was about ego driven, make as much money as possible, but actually hated everything about it. And then there was this other CEO who was making considerably more money that loved all the aspects and was in it for the right reasons, and it compares both the journeys. And I was definitely the guy that was ego driven, didn't really know why I was in there, didn't have any mindset development, like you were saying. Like, I definitely missed that shit back then as well. Like, I needed some sort of mindset development stuff. Whereas now, having everything that we have access to, it's completely fucking different, mate. But yeah, recommend that to anyone listening, man. The Motive, Alex Hormozy speaks about it. Fucking awesome book. But yeah, I guess, like, see, when you were competing, did you have any, what was your best moment? And like, in your mind, what was the best moment? What was like the worst or like the downfall?
I think the best moment for me probably was just like winning my first competition, because I think regardless at that point in time, the prize money was like a lot less or whatever like that. That feeling of leaving an event and any result bar first, for me at least, you know, you'd always leave, you'd be on the train up the road and you'd be just disappointed. Whereas eventually having that feeling of like, we were the best team at the event, everyone else is leaving sad, I'm leaving with a smile on my face. And I think I won like 250 quid for my first event, and I didn't care. It was just generally one of my favourite moments still to this day. I think my worst moment, it's hard, man. Generally there's been so many like bad moments. And I think my collegiate career as a whole, I almost see it as like different generations, even though it's only been like 12 years. I've kind of went through so many different periods. Exactly. I've went through so many different like periods of time. I'd say probably, like, you know, with the pressure involved and stuff in the collegiate league now, probably losing in like COD Champs finals as a coach was probably like the worst moment, because I believed that we should have won it that year. But again, that's still positive because we were in COD Champs finals. We had a really good year. Our team won like 1.2 million in prize money over that one season. So for me, I think that was obviously still successful. But I still do remember the raw emotion of that moment, feeling like the world had just ended, you know, because as a collegiate competitor, your whole dream is always to win the Collegiate World Championship, regardless of being a player or coach. So being that close to that dream that I've always had and not achieving it was, I think that was soul destroying. Yeah,
I can imagine, mate. And I think if probably like reflecting back on those sorts of moments, like what was the expectations of you as a coach during that time period?
I mean, that year our team wasn't expected to do well at all. I think pre-season rankings we were in like the 9th to 12th, so like not even making the Collegiate World Championship, because you need to finish in the top 8. So at that point in time we had, like, you know, massively exceeded the expectations. For me as a coach, like, there was a lot of questions in terms of, I made a big roster decision at one stage in the season that a lot of people hated. So to overcome the doubt from a lot of the fans from outside, and a lot of the public speaking, the people on podcasts, etc., who were ripping into me for my decision making. I think that definitely felt great. Overcoming that, and that year I got nominated for Esports Coach of the Year. So like overall, that year was just a really good one for me, and it was good to sort of overcome a lot of the doubt and stuff like that. And it was definitely good motivation.
Yeah, and I guess because even from my outside perspective, mate, from still watching CDL now and stuff like that, I didn't know that coaches actually had that level of responsibility in regards to helping with the decision making behind roster changes and stuff like that. Is that how in depth it is now?
Well, it just really depends on the organisation itself. Yeah. Like with Toronto Ultra, when I was there, we very much had a hands-on, weekly meeting with the CEO of the company where we were kind of mapping out plans for the future. Even with that year, we were still planning on community improvements going into the next year and stuff like that, even though we had massively exceeded expectations with that team. It's just constantly forward planning and looking to the future, and how do we get the most out of the players, and whether that be bringing in someone from a performance coach perspective to help bring more of the outside of the game team culture side of things and all that. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot involved to it, outside of just the strategy, tactics, being a coach side. You're also dealing with a lot of the managing up with the upper management within the company. So we would have a general manager within the team. I have my assistant coach, analyst, etc. that I'm dealing with. So I'm managing all these different personalities and having multiple meetings a week outside of all that.
That's fucking mad, mate.
Yeah.
I had no idea it was even that in depth. And that's coming from someone that literally played COD all these days. So if I'm out with the loop of that, there's definitely not enough credit in there. What are some of the challenges from players nowadays that you're helping them with?
I think nowadays, especially with players coming into the CDL now, where we had to come in at a time where it was still all very new and players didn't get paid a lot of money now. And now the young players coming in have almost this expectation that they are top level athletes, and they are, but they also behave like babies at times, So I feel imagine the older players who have kind of went through the transition like I have, of being where you were making nothing to now earning a lot of money. It's a lot easier to deal with those sort of personalities in respect to getting them to do things although it's not my job to do the marketing side of things and all that, just managing the players when it comes down to doing those sort of things was also a part of my job. So that's, I feel being the biggest difficulty is just getting them to understand, hey, listen, we need to do content, because otherwise the sponsors won't pay the company money and you won't get paid money in future, and the whole infrastructure doesn't work if that's not the case. And they're just no, I just want to play COD, and that is obviously good that they're just wanting to grind, but at the same time it was harder to get them to do all the extra things. Yeah,
which I think when you're the thing that's forefront of mind is you had these Optic, for example, that paved the way for content, and you can see obviously all the benefits that they reaped as a result of it. But I could imagine that a lot of those thoughts in regards to people just wanting to play COD actually stems from the lack of confidence to be on camera, lack of experience in those areas. Majority of gamers are quote unquote introverted, want to just be sitting just doing, like you said, playing COD. So I can imagine that a lot of the reasons for people not wanting to do those things probably stems from shit that people won't even think about, which is the lack of confidence. I mean, we even see it we'll have clients that come around and they'll want to start building a personal brand, and then all their content is graphics they make on Canva, and it's get in front of a camera, man. They're that's not me, that's not like me, and it's all these limiting beliefs start to come out. I'd imagine that you probably deal with quite a lot of that.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that overall, if you want to build a brand, you have to. People want to buy into the person behind the brand as well, so you need to show yourself regardless of what type of business you're doing, in my opinion. So I think that's super important for anyone who's building a brand,
100%
in any aspect.
Yeah, and I guess from a business perspective, obviously you're coaching just now. You've got 2 podcasts that you're co-hosting as well. Yeah, you ever thought about just starting a business, coming into business?
Definitely, but I mean, at the same time, I'm still so focused on my number one goal, and that's getting back into the Call of Duty League and being one of the best coaches in the league. And I still want to have opportunities to win the Call of Duty World Championship. So that's still my main focus right now, is doing all things to basically give myself the best possible opportunity of doing that.
100%, mate. And I guess where you're at from a coaching perspective, phasing out from ultras, what was the kind of reason? Can you even get into the reasoning behind phasing out as a coach there?
So I was with Ultra, then I had a ridiculous offer to join the LA Gorillas, so I joined them for a year. this season didn't go well at all. They were cutting back a lot of budgets, so they wanted to kind of go with a more North American. They didn't want to pay for like visas and all that sort of thing, housing. So they basically went with like an all American roster, players and staff. So that kind of basically left me in a situation where all the other teams had already got their coaches covered for the season, and now that was the only opportunity I had. And I actually left Toronto, and they ended up obviously finishing second in the World Championship last year. And we had obviously had a lot of success when I was there as well. So it was sad that I left to join something that I thought was going to be like a multi-year project. I actually skipped forward a lot of details there, actually. So I need to go back. With LAG, when I joined, they're owned by Stan Kroenke, who owns like Arsenal, the LA Rams, etc. Midway into the season, they decided to cut budgets massively within the company. And that's kind of why the whole decision happened. But they released like 80% of the staff, like basically nuked the entire company, and like really went super bare bones. And the budget wise of the team probably went down like 85-90%. Wow. So like, you know, that's kind of basically what happened. So obviously in hindsight, I wouldn't have left Toronto if I'd known that was going to happen. But the offer that I got was, you know, I won't give figures obviously, but it was like more than double what Toronto were offering. It was a ridiculous amount of money, like to be one of the like highest paid coaches in the league, etc. It was something I couldn't refuse. And if I could go back, obviously now, I wouldn't do it still. But at the same time, going back to that point again, if I'm, you know, still in the same situation, I think I make the same decision over and over again. How was I to predict that the company was just going to be like, we're just going to cut back 85% of the budget? So it's just one of those ones. It was unfortunate. Yeah,
it was fucking brutal, mate. And I think like definitely reflecting back in any sort of gaming like stuff, there was always some sort of fucking snaking, or there was always, not saying that the LG snake, but like from a perspective of in hindsight moments where it's like, oh, if I just stayed in that roster, I would have fucking won. I feel like that sort of stuff was rife, mate, especially like coming up. And I'd imagine it's still a thing now, man, because I know all the roster changes, they happen all the time. Those players getting to know. If I think back to when we played, it was like you would just be playing eights with someone and you'd be like, oh, I like this dynamic. I like how we play. I like how we communicate. I like how we maybe have stuff in common out with gaming as well. And then before you know it, you're trying to team with them. But you've got this roster that's actually working really fucking well. But you're like, but it could be so much better if we had this, because we'd have this in common. And I could imagine that happens. That still happens quite a lot, I'd imagine, right? Yeah, I think the one thing I've learned from that whole situation was whatever situation you're in, regards to the money being offered, etc., I think the most important thing is to go with the, at least from a competitive standpoint, go with the best possible team. Number one priority. Like, forget about the money. The money will take care of itself if you have a successful team. I made the mistake of going, okay, this team's slightly worse, but they're offering double money, so I'm going to take that offer, which in hindsight I feel like was my mistake there. And it's something I've learned from now, and I definitely think going forward I'm just going to be prioritising, the team I'm a part of over everything else, and I let it take care of itself, really. 100%, mate. I think, I guess, like, what I'm curious about, so your day-to-day when you were coaching, say the Ultras, because that was a really successful time period for yourself. What did the day-to-day look like? So, wake up, our scrims would start at 2, but you would have sort of practice and preparation beforehand in terms of doing like VOD reviews and stuff like that. But my day would usually start with me waking up at 10, sometimes going like a morning run with some of the other staff. We had like a little run club on the go. Then sometimes going to the gym beforehand, then getting into the office about 12:30, having lunch in the office with the players. Then we'd go into like a VOD review type thing for like an hour, from like 12:45, 1 till like 1:45. Then we'd go into practice at 2 p.m, 2 till 7 to 8. And then sometimes VOD review after, sometimes we would just do it the next day before the scrims would start, because we found that doing VOD review beforehand in scrims was a lot more impactful than doing it after, and then the players forget about what you've spoke about going into the next practice session. So most of the time it was beforehand for us. So yeah, that was kind of my day-to-day really, and it was pretty much that majority of the days. And then if it was like a league match day, we'd get to the facility maybe 3 hours before a match, do our preparation for that, whether that be, watching the team search and destroy, talking about how we're going to do the veto process, which is like the maps that you decide to play in the series, and then go into the, warm-ups for the games, and then go into the match, win the match, go out for food after. That was kind of like how the weekends went when we had COD League matches. It's fucking mental how the actual infrastructure has evolved like that, mate, because it's like an actual, like a proper infrastructure in place. Like, see, reflecting on like practice back in the day, it was like you get home from school or work and you're on for like 4:30, first scrims for like 5, and you'll just play as many, you'll tweet out scrims, like whereas there's a proper schedule in place, there's like proper structure.
Yeah, we would have like a weekly coaches call with all the coaches in the Call of Duty League, where you're basically planning out your entire like scrim schedule for that week. So we knew it wasn't like on the day you'd find out you're scrimming. You knew like a week and a half in advance exactly who you were playing on each day, and it was tailored so that like teams weren't playing against, you know, potentially a team that they'd be competing against that weekend and stuff like that. And obviously outside of that, like I mentioned earlier on in the podcast, we would have like meetings and all these sort of things outside of that. But
was there ever any like I guess like not companies but any teams and stuff like that that just, I don't know, like maybe like paved the way for that infrastructure? Like is there, or was it just like the CDL came in and it was like everyone follows a structure now?
I mean, I feel like teams like Optic definitely put like more into the like marketing side of things. Excuse me, the marketing side of things, and they definitely put more emphasis on like, you know, bringing in coaches early doors and stuff like that. In terms of like all the other stuff, I'd say a lot of that came within the CDL era, where you start seeing people bringing in like performance coaches and stuff like that, where you're looking to build the more team culture side of things. Whereas I'd say the marketing side was probably like Optic that done it there.
What were some of the things that the performance coaches were doing?
Like you'd have like team building exercises and stuff like that, and like I would have one-to-one meetings with the performance coach, who was, you know, an ex like sports coach himself, who would basically try and help me mold me into being more like a sports coach, because obviously at the same time I'm still a coach who's came from competing in Call of Duty, and although at this point in time I was still probably one of the more respected and like experienced coaches in the Call of Duty League, I still had so much to learn, and I had that mentality, like a very, you know, growth mindset focus, where I'm wanting to just constantly improve. And I know that even now, even 5 years from now, there's still so much to learn in a coaching respect. You've got, you know, football coaches who are like 60, 70 who have been doing it for like 30 years. So there's no way that I'm going to be at the top of the game. Even, you know, even if I'd won esports coach of the year, I wouldn't even have considered myself a good coach, because I still think there's so much to learn in the esports industry in general.
What do you feel like are the qualities of what you deem as a good coach that you maybe don't have but you see in others?
I think, that's a hard question. I think there's different ways of coaching, to be fair. So I think there's not like a one shoe size fits all type approach to coaching, I think. And I think that's one thing that I did have a problem with initially, where I thought there was one way of doing things and I didn't really want to deviate from that. Whereas now, looking back at it, I think depending on the players you've got, depending on the structure you've got going on, I think you need to coach in different ways. I think that the flexibility, I guess, of a coach is super important. And I think some coaches in the Call of Duty League have got a real good grasp on that in terms of like knowing like what player I'm coaching here and how to handle that. And I think I definitely have developed that. But at one point in time, I was like, you know, treating everyone the same, and that's not really necessarily how it works. Like some players might be a more visual learner, some players might need you to be like, you know, right to the point and being more aggressive towards them in terms of being like, right, mate, you need to stop fucking doing that. You're making the same mistake over and over again. Some players need to be like, right, listen, next time make sure that you're doing this, and that you need to talk very nice to them because they're emotional types. So just learning your players, I think that's probably the biggest, especially in a team-based game like COD, where there's only 4 players, unlike a sports team where you're maybe dealing with 20, 30 people. You need to really know each of those individuals and how to get the best out of those 4 individuals, and that might be different depending on who the person is. So
I love that, mate. I love it. Say we'll just go back to Ultras because that was the most recent example. If you weren't in the room, what do you think they would say about you as a coach?
I think they would say I was passionate. I think they would say I was fair. I would say they thought I was a prick at times. Yeah, they would definitely be ripping me for something, for sure. But I'd say definitely that I'd say passionate would be probably the number one thing that anyone would say about me. I'm very passionate about whatever I'm doing. And I put 100% into everything I do. So. And
even through your personal brand, mate, I could tell that for a mile away. Like when I think about probably how you've evolved in the gaming space, and from me like watching from the outside in, your one thing that has always never been questioned is like your level of passion / obsessiveness with like Call of Duty. It's never been questioned.
Yeah, I'm a loser. He's put it nicely, I'm a loser.
Oh, not at all, mate. Not at all. The thing is, mate, like, see the transferable skills, like me being fully in business now for like 4 years now.
Aye.
So much, mate, that I learned during that time period. It's especially like, so when you're referring to things like growth mindset and stuff like that. Like back then, I had no idea that I was like, all the mistakes that you make in a Call of Duty game is what is compounding for you to become better. And when I reflect back then, it's like when I watch stuff like with like Kobe Bryant, for example, I watched a video of his this morning again, and he was speaking about like just the importance of seeing every single cliche as fuck, every single mistake as a lesson. But even if I reflect back then, it's like that stuff that I've lived by now for 5, 6, 7 years. But I only actually learned it through every time you die on COD, it's a mistake.
Yeah.
Like, technically, but every time you die is a mistake. So I think I done the maths one time. It was like playing for over a decade, for the amount of hours on estimate that I played, it was something like 3.6 million mistakes I'd made to actually become good at COD, which is like a mental concept. Because
you're conditioning your brain to almost think like, whenever anything goes wrong, like what can I do better next time? You know what I mean? So I feel like you definitely condition your brain into that mentality when you're competing in anything.
Yeah.
And I think that goes for like any sport in general. Like I think you get that mentality where you're like, okay, how do I get better? Where do I go from here? Yeah.
Because I think when we crossed our paths again was in Warzone.
Yeah.
Tournament. I think it was the Ultras hosted the like 200k invite.
Yeah.
But I remember like when I was streaming during that time period, what viewers used to love was like doing live commentaries of like what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
And like see the amount of, victim like mindsets in Call of Duty, but the amount of blame on external things. Like it's never my fault, or the game's shite, or like there's always something else to blame. Like no matter what on Warzone, which is a battle royale, which for any context, like there's a lot of luck involved in like battle royales, a lot of luck. Whereas what Mark's like came from like the competitive side of things, even though there's still a little bit of luck involved at times, there is like the most dominant teams will win.
Yeah.
Which in Warzone that's not always the case.
Yeah.
But no matter what, when I was streaming, I was doing live commentaries, I think people loved it because I would always be able to trace it back to when I made a mistake. Whether that was like people always look at the right here and now, but there's always some point in the tail end of something that you made some sort of wrong decision that wouldn't have led to that outcome.
Yeah.
That I think like I can imagine you probably not at the level of like CDL and stuff like that, not having to deal with it as much anymore, but mate, I can imagine like the amateur scene and stuff, how fucking rife like a victim like mindset of complaining all the time. It was terrible back then. I don't imagine it's got any better. Yeah.
No, I'd say like at the higher end, like in the amateur scene, a lot of the players have competed in the CDL, so I think their mentalities are a lot better in that sense. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of that, like, always looking at someone like if they lose to a random player, like, oh, this guy's hacking, or always looking for reasoning to why they lost. Like, my team, it's always after events now. You'll be like, because after, the Sunday night at an event, when you're traveling away, most of the time everyone's going to like the bar after for a drink, and you'll have someone that's had one too many and they're ranting about their team and how bad someone was, and they're just basically trying to throw other people under the bus to try and put themselves back on that position of being like, oh no, he's not that bad, he just lost to some really bad team, it was his teammates' fault type thing. And I think that type of mentality still happens, and that's one thing when I see that happening at events, I noticeably like remember that. And as a coach, that's one thing that I do not like, players that are doing that on a regular basis, and I'm never looking to bring those type of players into my team. The first thing whenever I was signing players would be, we'd have a bunch of interviews, and we'd even do stuff like in Ultra, like personality tests and stuff like that. Regardless, we would always make sure when we're asking players about their previous teams, what's like, where did things go wrong, and like ask them more, not negative questions, but kind of like try to pick their brain a little bit to see if they'd start throwing people under the bus. And I think that the real like best players and the ones that we always wanted to sign more, outside of seeing how they were performing in COD, was the ones that had like a lot of accountability and being like, in that final, we made some mistakes as a team. I think I messed up map 2. Someone that was like, looked at themselves as a bit of the problem, rather than just being like, okay, I did nothing wrong, I'm a great player, that's why I'm in this interview right now. Yeah,
I love that, mate. I love the personality test. Like, that's fucking awesome, bro. Like, that's like the level of like depth, even like some of the questions that you're referring to there, like that's like a level of I don't know how to explain it, mate. It's like you've really taken me by surprise with like the actual infrastructure that's in place for coaching, and also how how you've developed as a coach as well. Like, it's something that, like, doing this podcast, I was like, when I first messaged you, I knew there was a lot of things that we could relate to any entrepreneurship, but there's fucking shit tons from the coaching perspective, mate. Like, from leading a team forward, being a CEO, having staff, like, all of that shit's so important, man. And some of the companies that, like, will come in and help with, like, HR or operations, like, personality tests, and, like, I know there was a company that was in YNL at one point, and they literally had one of the companies, I think one of the companies, like, 16 personalities. There was a book written about it. And the guy that wrote the book, like, he created a company that would come in and basically help dissect who is most compatible within the team, how they should be nurtured, how they should be managed, helped, leaded forward. And it's mad that, like, that sort of shit was in the ultra side.
That's the thing with the personality test side of things. You definitely got to take... It's basically to paint the full picture, you know what I mean? So personality tests can't be 100% accurate every single time, but from my experience of when we did them, there was obviously a lot of things that were like, okay, maybe that's not true. But then there was a lot of aspects in terms of how to, you know, get the best out of people when you're giving them criticism and stuff like that. That stuff, from what I'd seen from the majority of players I'd worked with, was accurate like 95% of the time. So for me, I think that it definitely was a benefit. I did always manage to, you know, balance it well though, where I'm not like, because I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to say who, I don't want to throw him under the bus, but there was like a manager in Ultra that was very much like trying to build teams off of the personality tests, and we definitely had to put our foot down and be like, listen, it's not like 100%, like you can't have, because these two guys have the same personality, it doesn't mean they can't be in the same team together. So like, it's one of those ones where it was definitely one thing that had to be managed.
Is that what you looked for then, like personalities that were different but would work well?
I mean, like I said, it wasn't really like we used the personality test to build the team. I would say it was more so beneficial for like how to get the most out of the players. But there was definitely some times where it would be like, okay, these two personalities on paper should clash, and then they did clash, you know what I mean? But you can't always have a team that's just getting on perfectly. You sometimes need those personalities to clash.
100%. Did you ever do like a because one of the things I was exposed to would be like, what, a year and a half back, a chronotype quiz? A
chronotype? No, I've not heard of that.
So it's just like based on like what like it's like a variation of like sleep, like when you're most optimal to sleep in regards to how you are as an individual. It's why like the early rises for me, for example, like I know that based on the chronotype quizzes, don't know like how much there is. Same with the personality stuff. It's like how much is this actual like truly like science backed like stuff. But the chronotype side of things was something that really opened my eyes as well, where it's basically broken into like 4 different categories, where you'd have like a lions, those that get up at like 4 a.m. and they can just run, like just fucking go ham. You've got like, I think it's like bears can get up from like 6 onwards, run about those sort of levels. And then you've got like, obviously that's where the term night owls come from, where they prefer to work through the night. And it's basically like, it helps you understand when you're most optimal to work and also when you're most optimal to sleep. I think for me, like when I'd done those things, there was a few tests I'd done. One was personality test, chronotype quiz, and I done an intolerance test because I was getting brain fog a lot, and it turns out it was the food that I was eating. So I'm curious, like, was it just the personality test, or was there any other sort of stuff as well?
I mean, like, though they didn't do chronotype tests.
Yes.
So no, to be honest, we didn't do any of that sort of stuff. But I think that those sort of things could have been beneficial, but at the same time in COD, because all the teams are competing against each other, you kind of had to scrim at a certain time. Obviously, if we could look at it and be like, oh, our team learns and performs better in the morning, then we'd do that. But at the end of the day, they're going to have to compete some nights at 9 p.m. at night. Some days they're going to be competing at 12. So they kind of need to be conditioned to be practicing during the kind of main portion of the day. But yeah, that obviously depended on where we lived. Like when I was living in LA, we would have to get to the facility at like 9 in the morning, whereas in Toronto it was getting to the facility at 12 because of that 3-hour time difference between the coasts. So like it was very much like you're going to the facility in LA and having breakfast, whereas in Toronto you're going and having lunch. So it's definitely like a little different there. And I definitely personally felt like I'm a morning person, but even right now I'm basically in a position where I can't work mornings because of just the position I'm in now, and I do a podcast on Sunday nights after the CDL finishes, which, you know, last night finished at like 2 a.m. or something. So by the time that finished, then everyone got on for the podcast. But it finished at like 5:30 a.m. So it's not possible for me to like then go, oh, I'm just going to wake up at 8 a.m. and just go to the gym, because at the end of the day, sleep is super important as well. And to be honest, I didn't get a great amount of sleep last night, but I mean, it is what it is. It's just the kind of life I live at the minute. And it's what I've kind of got used to, really.
I've been seeing your journey quite a lot in regards to the gym.
Yeah.
How much of an impact is that? Just like, how much of a focus has it been prior compared to like now, and like what's the impact been like in your life?
I think now my mentality is like, you know, my health and well-being is like my number one priority. Before it was no priority whatsoever. When I was like, you know, I was probably about 5 stone heavier at one stage, so it definitely wasn't much of a focus at that point. I'm ordering, like, this is when I was competing, I'm ordering, you know, Chinese food, chippies, like Domino's, like, you know, multiple times a week and stuff like that with my prize winnings. Like, it was just, one, just a waste of money. 2, obviously you don't really notice it when you're gaining weight because it happens like gradually over time. Yeah. But like, I was just destroying myself, and I think that definitely had a negative impact on my performances in Call of Duty as a player, because at the stage when I was, you know, at my best, I wouldn't really say I was in like great shape, but I was definitely in the best shape I was when I was competing, you know, at my best. So for me, it's one of the things that I've definitely, since I've started putting more emphasis onto health and well-being, it's had more of an impact positively across the board in my entire life. So
I definitely, reflecting back, like, I remember you being like super lean, like during like the time period of like TC, like not even TCM,
when I first
like,
got into it,
like those sort of time periods. But yeah, no, it's super interesting because I think it's something like, especially the streaming side of things, like I'd play with players that would order Domino's before the tournaments would start. And how are you even functioning, man? Like, how are you even? Because there is like an actual, like, the blood flow that's going to digest the food is, like, your brain is not operating at the highest capacity that it can. So how are you even competing? How are you even like playing?
Exactly.
It's mad.
When we were in, and that's one thing when we were in Toronto that was a real big focus, and a lot of the players, even though like they weren't exactly like, you know, jacked 6-pack lads, they were definitely, when it came down to those game days, fueling their body in an optimal way. We had like nutritionists that would come in and giving us speeches and about the importance of like your stomach being like your second brain almost. If your stomach's upset, your brain's gonna be, you know, massively impacted in terms of like the focus of it, you know, when you're distracted by your stomach, etc. So the players were all on top of that and really on job with making sure that, you know, a few hours before the game having like a nutritious meal and staying on point and drinking water, not just fueling themselves off Monster energy drinks or Red Bull or, you know, all those great companies. Not putting any slander on energy drinks, because I still do sometimes drink energy drinks for sure, but at one stage when I was a player, I was just, you know, having like 3 or 4 a day, thinking that I was just normal. But now I'm a coffee guy. I'm a coffee guy now. I've moved up in the world. I've matured.
That's a sign of maturity, definitely. No, I was the same. Even reflecting like my first event, which was I-51 when I was 14, I had a Subway before we played on the Saturday.
Yeah.
And I like I just remember like sitting 14 years old in a room full of shouting men. Like, I remember watching in and it was like, fuck man, what's his name? Is it Campbell? The big Scouse guy?
Yeah.
And he was screaming. He was like, "See you next Tuesday," shouting at cunts, like going off their head. And I remember walking in, like fucking eating my Subway, sitting down to play. I just remember like just not being, like just fucking like not being anywhere near optimal. And at the time, obviously, it was like a ritual like thing where it was like, right, cool. First game, because we lost in the first round of the winners bracket at that first tournament, and then we went on to place, I think it was top 12 or top 16. We lost to Shark, which was like Nile, and Urban and stuff like that. And I remember like during that time period thinking, oh, it's because I ate beforehand, right? And even though there probably wasn't that much truth to it, that carried on throughout my gaming days, where any tournaments I wouldn't eat before. And then when I actually researched into it, there was actual backing behind it in regards to like eating fucking shit food that's carb dense and how it could result in brain fog. And I was like, fuck, man. Like, I actually could have put the impact back then.
And not only that, it's like so individual as well. There's like, I think that's one thing, just learning what your body needs. There's some people, for me at least, I done the same approach. Like, I went through a period of time where I just wasn't eating before it, but then I just generally felt like I was out of it by the end of the long days, especially back then when it was like you were playing like 5-6 matches. So, you know, different players are different, like at least from my experience when I've been coaching, is that some players need, you know, like, you know, a light snack before a game. Some players need to eat like a large meal like 2-3 hours before. Some people just don't eat at all, like you said. So it's just one of those ones where you got to find out what works best for you.
100%, man. 100%. One of the things I'm curious about is your relationship with Jurd. Because I know that I believe he's staying like in
Oh, I
Scotland?
live with them.
You live with them?
Yeah, I live with them. I live with them.
I didn't know if he's lived together or not, if he was
Yeah,
just like
yeah.
based around that side of things. Obviously, like for anyone that's watching this, man, that's like not got any gaming knowledge at all.
Legend.
Legend of the game.
Yeah.
Legend of the game without a
Legend.
doubt. But Judd was someone that was like super quiet, no personal brand.
Yeah.
I'm curious, man, like what's your relationship like now? And then like what's he doing? Is he
Well, he obviously lives with me. Basically what happened was, I'll kind of give you the backstory to that. Yeah. I bought my house in September, moved in October, and he was like, I think we talked at Call of Duty Championships or whatever, like about, we were making crazy theories like, let's go to Australia one day or something like that. We were coming up with these crazy plans, but eventually what happened was, because I was moving in myself into a 3-bedroom house and I'd just bought the house and now I'm no longer in the Call of Duty League, I was like, well, maybe it's probably a smart financial thing to maybe just ask him if he wants to live with me for a year. So basically he was like, yeah, I'm down to move in with you. So he moved over to Glasgow, just share a house together. He's actually a great roommate, to be honest with you. From my no hate to my previous roommates, but he's the best one for sure. He's very clean, like you said. He keeps himself to himself. Yep. As well, you know, like he has always been from a Call of Duty perspective as well. So I mean, I don't see him too much. I see him a lot at the gym. Like I don't know if you've seen my Instagram stories of that. Like me and him go to the gym pretty much every day together. So kind of just helping each other there. He's like been really into health and fitness for a longer period than me. Right now he's trained to become a personal trainer. Outside of that, he's just been pretty much just grinding different games and stuff like that, to be honest. He's still obviously got a lot of savings. He won a lot more money than me and salaries and whatnot, so he's definitely still got a lot of money in the bank ready to go. So he's just been sort of doing that. He's talking about hypothetically, you know, moving to Australia and stuff like that. That, like I said, was the initial conversation we had. I'm not doing that, but he's thinking about it. So yeah, that's kind of where he's at right now.
That's mad. I think like those sort of relationships as well, like from that long, because like the first team that we were referring to, like to begin with, you were on that team together, and that was, like I said, when I was fucking 13, 14. And
no, to be fair, we never teamed together.
You weren't on TCM together?
No. I got dropped for him.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah. I got dropped for him. They were on it. He was on it. Like for the majority of the time I was on TCM, he was on Epsilon, and we were like competing against each other. So we were rivals. Yeah, we were rivals.
I just remember him being on TCM. I didn't know that he's.
No, I got dropped. I got dropped for him falling off, but now he's living with me.
Fuck. That is mental.
So we never actually teamed together at an event, which sucks. But
yeah, I get you. I guess out of curiosity, then see the podcasts. I've been curious to dig a bit more into them. Obviously, you're doing one with Deserto.
Yeah.
And then you're doing, is it like your own one for like the challengers or?
So like the challengers one is more of like a passion project type thing. Like, you know, the viewership and all that sort of stuff isn't good, but like at the end of the day, it's one of those things we're trying to get more eyes on the challenger scene, and I'm trying to also learn more about the challenger scene personally, because I'm just getting involved in it, and although I've been paying super close attention to it from like a, you know, seeing who's doing well, so we're scouting players, etc. side, I still don't know a lot of the personalities and know a lot of their backstory. So like it's good for that, and learning from the other co-casters that I have on there who are more deeply entrenched in the challenger space. I feel like I'm just learning each and every day, and I'll say some dumb stuff on there that's just completely incorrect, and they'll call me up on it. So I think for me that's more of like a, first of all, like I'm getting more experience doing podcasting, but second of all, just learning more about the challenger space, which I'm a part of, and you know, watching more Call of Duty matches, because that's typically what it leads to. And then with the Deserto podcast, it's a bit different. You know, I've on there with like a bunch of experienced guys within the Call of Duty space, with Sensor, Aches, and Parasite, who are like some of the biggest names in the Call of Duty space. And with that, it's a lot more, you know, I'd say professional in a sense. And we've got a producer and all the sort of stuff, people doing different shorts for our content and stuff like that. So that's obviously not produced by me at all or anything like that. So it's completely different.
I get you. I guess from like a personal brand aspect, like is there, you ever had like a personal brand strategy, or has it just been a matter of like you just show up as you and you post what you want?
Nah, I've not. Honestly, I've been winging it for a while. At different
You've done well, bro, for someone that's been winging it.
Yeah, I mean, for a while, to be honest, I definitely want to put more of an emphasis into, like, you know, actually creating a full-on plan and creating more content on different platforms, etc. It is hard. It's like, I also don't want to be one of those guys that has their hand in like every pie and is average at everything. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's trying to find the balance. At different moments, I felt like I've put too much emphasis on the content. Sometimes I've felt like I've put too much emphasis on the competing and not put enough emphasis on content. And for me, I'm still trying to find the balance really, and trying to do well in both of those avenues, but also, you know, not having a negative impact as well.
Yeah, because I think it's like from a priorities aspect, like you just said earlier on when I asked you about doing something in business, your first response was, I want to win COD champs as a coach.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is clearly like the top priority. So anything else just seems like you're taking time and attention away from it.
Exactly.
Which I guess like in the business world, especially for myself, it's like I've never really enjoyed creating content, quote unquote, but it's been important for me to build some sort of authority for people to know who I am. But it does get to a stage where it's like I could spend 5 hours on a Monday morning on stuff to do with our marketing with paid ads, and that could have a direct impact on fucking, I don't know, 5 times more leads, which then results in like 3x more clients being signed, and then we've added a fucking huge amount to our top line and our revenue.
Yeah.
And when you start getting presented stuff like that, it's like, well, do I really want to spend 5 hours this week on my personal brand if I could just pull this lever, make more money? And I guess at that point is where like outsourcing, it's why Optic have done so fucking well, mate, because everything's outsourced. They've got videographers, they've got all these guys in place where, like with the Deserto stuff, having an editor there to just clip up shorts, that'll save you so much time, man.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, so much time.
Yeah.
Which is fucking mad. What is, I guess, like, I was curious, you said about you learned a lot from doing it, you're learning a lot from doing the Challengers podcast about actually being a podcast host.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you've learned?
Mine
was that I talk too much.
Yeah, I think that's probably mine as well, to be honest, because like with the Deserto podcast, it's very much like a fight to talk with. Like we have 3 very opinionated, very talkative guys, whereas with the Challengers podcast, I almost feel like it's a bit easier for me to just go on tangents and stuff like that and just waffle for like 5 minutes, and I'm like, how long was I talking for there? Shit. So I definitely think that is 100% me, and I've probably done it today as well, so sorry.
Your cushies, I guess, mate. I can always measure how good an episode is by how little I talk.
Okay.
To be fair, because I think
done all right then.
Yeah, I've done that. To be fair. I think as a host, especially when you're bringing on other people, man, like people know all my shit. Like they know me. It's about me capturing something that, like, I feel like from this perspective, this episode, mate, we've captured stuff that never been captured before on the podcast. Like it's something that's outside perspective. It's a different industry. It's something that's completely, like I think a lot of stuff, like the business world has definitely evolved into the gaming world, but there's a lot of shit in the gaming side of things, mate, that could definitely be picked up. I think the main thing that I've taken from what you said today is like the importance of adopting a growth-like mindset where you're cool with mistakes, but at every level. So it's like a mistake when you're doing 20 grand a month could result in you losing 5 clients, and you go from 20 grand a month to 15 grand a month. It's still one mistake, or maybe many different mistakes, but having the same mentality as just dying 20 times in a COD game and just being like, initial response, as soon as you die, okay, what did I do wrong? Where can I trace it back to? How can I fix it? How do I make sure it doesn't happen again? Applying that same level of mindset where it doesn't impact you at all, no matter at what level, I feel like can be adopted and applied like fucking tenfold, mate.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. And I think that's just the nature of the business that we're in, is that there's no one else that's done it beforehand, so you kind of just need to just make mistakes and go from there and figure it out on the way. Because if you're scared to make those mistakes, then I don't think you're going to get anywhere. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah. 100%, man. Have you had any like mentors or like people that you've been learning from?
Yeah, I'd say, from my last couple of years in Call of Duty, I'd say my big mentors were a guy called Borko I worked with in Toronto. He was like an ex-basketball coach. He gave me a lot of help there, and it certainly increased my like knowledge of how to be and how to handle myself as a coach. And then in terms of like the management side, I had someone called Beth, who was like very much not involved in esports whatsoever, who worked with Toronto, and she taught me more on the business side and like the management side and how to deal and manage up within like the organisation. I'd say that honestly, there's so many people I can give credit to be honest. I'd say one more other person I want to give a massive shout out to was my assistant coach at Toronto, Ryan. We all even the team called us yin and yang. I was like the more, passionate guy. He was the more calm guy for sure. And learning from him, and me and him have both obviously went our different ways now, but he's obviously took some aspects of what I was doing, and I feel like I've took some aspects of what he was doing to make myself more of like a, calmer personality, as well as still remaining passionate at the same time, I
think it's required, mate. I think a lot of partnerships that go into, because we've had a lot of business come through Y now where they'll start as a partnership but then they'll fade out. Somebody will go off and do their own thing, or someone will sell their shares, whatever it is, like something will happen along those lines. And I think whenever I've seen those moments happen, it's when they are too similar. Like they see the world the exact same way, and there is no. It's like Andy, who I run Young and Lazy with. One example always springs to mind. He's super risk averse. I'm super risk seeking. I'll risk it all tomorrow. Whereas he is like super risk averse. So like that yin and yang was perfect. Because otherwise, I remember when he first came on board, we were thinking about building like an app for Young and Lazy where people could go on courses and resources and all that sort of stuff. And I got a quote and it was like $7,500 for this. And I was like, and we didn't have $7,500 at the time. So I was like, cool, we'll go and get investment. Let's just go and do it. What's the worst that can happen? And then Andy was just like, how the fuck have you went from like 10 minutes ago thinking of this idea to kicking into action, getting some feedback back that it's possible, and then just saying that you're going to just give equity away for the company, take someone $7,500. Like there was just such a, and I think that yin and yang from him opened my mind to how like off the chains at times with the risk and stuff of just wanting to do things without really dialing in on like what it is that you're actually doing.
And a COD perspective, that would be me like, this game, let's just do this crazy strategy and like let's just do it every round. And Ryan would be like, nah, like calm down, throw it in there, but like don't do it every round, that would be me. I'm definitely on the same boat as you, where I'm just, if I've lost like an S&D, for example, to a team like once or twice, I'm just like, let's just throw the kitchen sink at it, let's just try something crazy. Whereas that's maybe not the mentality, because Ryan would be like, no, but we actually only lost that by like that one situation, we just need to fix that. He was definitely more of the calming presence in the dual ship.
More analytical for sure.
I
guess in like business terms as well, man, like there's a book I recommend, I watch, I recommend to anyone to watch it or read. It's called Rocket Fuel, and it speaks about an infrastructure within companies, which is like you have a visionary, then you have an integrator. The visionary is more like us. We're more like higher on emotion. We'll work on the vision, we'll work on the big ideas, we'll manage big relationships. We'll very much do a lot of development on the like pushing the business forward, maybe more behind the scenes but actually doing some leading as well. Whereas an integrator is more of the analytical, fueled by logic, what you see the numbers, just me and Andy are we slot into those roles pretty well. I can imagine that working with you and Ryan as well, which is awesome, mate. What's some of the goals you've got for the gym and running? We just kind of brushed over that, but I wanted to
well, I mean, I wouldn't really say like for the gym I've got like any specific goals. I'm just like, I've go 6 days a week to the gym, I'm following my training plan, I've been seeing improvements in my physique. Running, though, I want to run a marathon. I do plan on running a marathon this year. Nice. So that's kind of where my goals lay within that. But yeah, my marathon training could have been going a little better, to be fair. Like at this point in time, I wanted to be running like, at least 30 kilometers every week. Not every week, but like at least pushing myself to run like 30 kilometers. The furthest I've ran so far is like a half marathon, so I definitely need to try and over the next couple of weeks try and get myself out there to run some 25, 30 Ks, and then try and look at doing a marathon around September time. Obviously before that I'm gonna have to taper down the amount of running I'm doing to give myself some recovery, but I need to get out in some longer runs, put it that way.
100%, mate. I love that, bro. We've had a couple of individuals in the network, mate, that are going to go, and they've done half marathon, full marathon, stuff like that as well. But there's a few of the lads, I think it's a couple of them been on the podcast, to be fair, but there's 4 of them going and doing a 24-hour run that's like a relay.
Wow.
So it's like they'll run, I think it's like 8 kilometers at a time, and they'll just like relay between them. And they're going to be doing that in I think around about September time as well.
That's mad.
And it looks fucking nuts, mate, because we had
that is crazy.
Connor Malone on, who's an awesome guy, man. He's big from a continuous improvement, self-development side of things. He's also a personal trainer, online coach as well. And Connor done the 4x4x48 by David Goggins. Have you heard about that?
I've heard about it, yeah.
It's like run a 4 miles every 4 hours.
Yeah. Nah.
Not about it.
I'm not ready. No. I mean, I wouldn't say like I'm one of those people that like I definitely like to challenge myself, but I'm not like I'm not going to go from just running half marathons to just try and say I'm going to do that. I definitely like to set myself some like realistic goals. So next is a full marathon, and then maybe we'll start talking about like ultra marathons, stuff like what David Goggins is doing. But for me, you know, that's still a bit away.
Yeah, 100%, mate. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean, we've covered a lot of stuff that I wanted to dig deeper on, mate. I'm really pleased, mate, from an aspect of highlighting a lot of stuff within the coaching side of things, mate. I think like you boys clearly don't get enough credit, because even from my perspective, someone that is still in tune with all that space, I had no idea that it was this intricate and this in detail, which I guess get a wee strategy in place for your personal brand to start talking about this stuff, mate, because I think fucking, mate, people will be flabbergasted. And also, like with the gaming space, with how respected you are as an individual, like the players obviously listen to you. So imagine like the impact you could have if you were speaking around the growth mindset versus scarcity, those sort of different aspects. I imagine you could change some fucking serious lives,
true,
mate.
Yeah, 100%, mate. I'll keep that in mind.
Definitely as well. I appreciate it, mate. Well, where can people find you?
On Instagram, I'm MarkyB COD. On Twitter, I'm just MarkyB.
Yep.
Apart from that, I mean, Twitch as well. Twitch is MarkyB as well. So pretty simple.
Awesome, mate. And what can people expect from you in the near future?
Expect me to be back in the CDL this year. At the end of the season, that's my plan. Expect me to run a marathon.
Nice.
Expect that. I'll get it done.
Get on Instagram as well, Trips. Like obviously I said MarkyB COD, but that's primarily where we put the fitness updates.
Yeah. So I keep my I'd say my Instagram is more of like my personal, like doing, you know, health and fitness stuff. Twitter is more so for gaming. So. Yeah. If you're into both, follow me on both. If you're into just fitness, just follow me on Instagram.
Amazing, mate. I really appreciate you coming on, bro. Honestly, I really
appreciate you too, mate.
Trips, if you're on YouTube, obviously there's episodes going up every 2 weeks on YouTube and Spotify. If you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe for more. Episodes are coming in the future. We're rolling these out fortnightly. We want to get to a stage where it's weekly as well. Get more guests lined up, and obviously how well these episodes do is completely dictates the level of guests that we get on as well, man, which is... Things have been incredibly well recently, so make sure you subscribe to it. Let me know your favourite part of the podcast. And yeah, thank you for listening.